Hi, nice to see everyone. This is Tom Sard. Believe it or not, this is the last of the 24 articles of the series, 24th. It ends with this article here. Next year, we will be doing some other things. There'll be plenty of other articles, but this is the last of all those scientists and what they had been working on for all those many, many years, 200 years or longer. This one is about a fossil, as you would know, called Turkana Boy. He was found in the 1900s, 1984, I think, and obviously in Africa. Actually, I'll read it from here. Lake Turkana, obviously Turkana Boy, in Kenya, and it turns out he was a young boy, 10 or 11 years old, clearly died there, but was relatively older and mature. The most important part is that this is the first time that we have the most completed scientist, skeleton, sorry, lots of scientists. But it's almost perfectly complete. You can go to New York, to the American Museum of Natural History, and get a really good picture of it. You saw it in the thing, but I'll give it to you here too. That's a good picture of it right there. So he's really quite complete. And given the study of the skeleton, clearly he was a Homo erectus, clearly was walking, no longer climbing in trees. What they referred to, and you'll see it in the article, as bipedalism, so able to walk, which is a large part of how we continued to evolve. But I had heard in my work, and I've been working on this for a long, long time, that I had heard that this boy had a Broca's area in his head. And I found out about that reading one article or another, and then went really looking for scientific information that I could find about that particular skeleton and find out exactly how it was that he had a Broca's area, because he was born 1.6, 1.7, 1.5, 1.6 million years ago. And I wanted to know if he could talk, and I wanted to know why he had the Broca's area, and why it is that all of us don't know anything about this thing called the Broca's area unless you're a scientist or had a stroke or some other brain injury that rendered you with difficulty being able to read, write, or speak well, and finding out that's part of the Broca's area where you likely had an injury in that area. So I went looking for years to find out about this Broca's area and this thing called Endocast. Again, I'd read about it. I could see it on a Wikipedia, but I needed to find a book that would provide me with all that kind of information. And it took me a couple of years, but here it is. This is the book. You see it in the article too. It's quite big, as you see here. You get to see what it looks like. And as you say there, they called him they still call him the Turkana Boy, and they also call him Nariokotome Boy, clearly coming from the river that was also close by. They also call him, as they do with all fossils like this, they have them very technical names for each one. This one is called, because it made it easier, because when I was reading, there were all kinds of assignments to the name with numbers and letters, but this one is called KNM-WT, and it turns out to be 1500, 15000. Many of the books I've been reading have all kinds of references to all kinds of skeletons, with KWT 1442, all kinds of numbers, meaning who they are, where they were in the world when they were found and discovered and assigned. all very interesting, and you get a lot from the hyperlinks in my article. But the boy was quite tall. His long arms and legs. Again, this is all part of how they could tell that he obviously was maturing in terms of the Homo evolutionary process for all of what becomes Homo sapien. But in reading this book, what I was so thrilled about, I might have told you it's cost several hundred dollars to find one like this. And this is an old one. It's really, really well done. But there's a complete chapter on the Endocast, complete chapter just on that. They have all kinds of chapters. Again, it's in the article too, explaining where he was at that time, what probably happened, how did they find out what he ate, you name it. They were figuring all this out with this 500-page book, giving you a tremendous amount of information. Of course, in my case, I wanted to find out about all this and found it with this particular book. And you can still see it online. Again, you'll see it in the article. Obviously, his brain was much bigger than other pre-hominins, pre-homos. And a lot had changed with his arms and legs. As I mentioned, his nose was a lot more sharp, not as flat as they used to be. And the emergence of the Broca's area. I say the emergent because there's a place in your brain called the Broca's area. And if you had other skulls, you could touch and see, because of the way the brain works, with the Endocast, there's so much information on the brain, so much innervation, so many nerves in a certain place, that it bumps out into the skull. So the skull allows you to see that the Broca's area of the brain, there's so much nerves there that it pushes it out. So there's what they call a hollow or a thimble or a slant in that area. And as I read about it, found out that he did have one, which is always amazing, given that Broca himself, Paul Broca, didn't work until the 1800s. But in fact, now as they found out back then in the 1800s that he was Paul Broca, who had figured out about the Broca's area, then finding all of these skeletons, some of which do have Broca's area, some of don't. And in Turkana Boy, he had a Broca's area, but it's likely that he couldn't speak, but he was developing new activities that allow him to be more thoughtful about what he was doing in terms of, as it turns out, hunting. So it obviously takes a lot more mental activity to be able to think about building a tool and then using that to find, hunt, and eat one kind of animal or another. And that was the beginning of them understanding just their evolution, as well as other homos beginning to evolve as they were starting to do any number of activities that were cognitive activities, but yet still couldn't express about go find that lion, right? Run from that lion. They couldn't do that. They just ran from that lion. But they did start to develop the tools that they could use if they had to either defend themselves or to kill one animal or another in order to eat. And the more they did that and did start eating certain things, they provided more nutrition that allowed them to grow, again, more brain matter based on plasticity, which obviously was occurring even back then going forward. So as they could see that he had a Broca's area, and with the Endocast, that whole chapter about the Endocast, you get to see that it doesn't include both the Broca's area and the Wikipedia area also there in that same, Broca Wikipedia in the back, but began to see that with, as it says, clear evidence of these different components of the brain. And I'll read some of these articles, especially as they were beginning to understand whether he really, meaning Turkana Boy, really could speak or not. Based on what they could see and where he was in the path moving towards Homo sapiens, as these different periods of earlier Homo than sapien going forward, and how clearly some at the very beginning didn't have Broca's area at all, and then going forward, starting to see more Broca's area appearing, typically as they were starting to use more tools, again, driving the creation of additional neurons, cells in the Broca's area, in that particular part of the brain that was, they didn't know it at the time. We barely know it now, that was the beginning of how it could adapt the nerves that were needed based on the activities they were doing on the outside, that would help him grow more brain matter on the inside. But reading about it here, as it said that the authors of this book were talking about it and said that the Broca's area may be functionally similar to modern human brain activities, symmetries, but only at the very basic level, involving primary functions such as motor sequencing or tax specialization, rather than at the level of specific behavior such as throwing or language production. So again, that's the beginning of the Broca's area, but in fact, it shows up in the same place, and enough of the additional nerves are such that it's pushing out the skull so that you can actually go in and feel it, that indentation, the thimble, as they say. I mentioned before, you can go see the cast of Turkana Boy at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. I've been there several times, but I never thought to go look for him. I went there several years ago. Here's a picture of it that I took there. If they can see that, okay. I think you probably can. And so when I found out about it, I had to go there and see him. So I did, and got to see it up close and get to see just how complete he was, which is really quite something. But the curator at that time, who wrote several books about his activity as a curator at that museum, he remarked, I'll give you this quote too: "Turkana Boy and his kin were a long way from being simply junior leave versions of ourselves, and we should resist the temptation to view them that way." Meaning, of course, that the Homo Erectus, different kinds of pre-Homo sapiens, they were literally different species. They grew up, did what they could, and perished with their species, and more other homos were started after that. So they're saying basically, it's not like if they just grow up and continue to grow up, they become Homo sapiens. But he said it's entirely clear that they had obviously done a tremendous amount of improvement of their species going forward that allowed future homos, using some of those same activities that the earlier homos were doing, and use that to push forward and find out more activities that were more cognitive, useful, that allowed them to grow and use more language activities going forward. And as I say here, it is amazing that Broca's area started to appear in the 1 to 2 million years ago, 1.6, 1.5, 1.6 with Turkana Boy. Earlier than that, just emerging. Later than that, getting better, and then new additional species, including the Homo sapiens. But it's amazing to see that it took still another 1,000,000+ years to move all the way forward, doing all the activity and the evolution that occurred on all of these earlier Homo specific species to become who we are today with the real Paul Broca, and all of us having a Broca's area again, that most of us don't know much about it, how it works, and how learning really works when it comes to plasticity, which is really how all this happens, um, given these activities, and why it is that we all should know, again, at least a little bit about how the brain works, because then you can better understand how you learn and how you can learn better, differently. Teachers can learn too about how people learn differently, and can inform their students about that. But until the students and the teachers know more about plasticity, the foundation of all learning, that sadly, that is um, one of the tools that we haven't consciously come to understand why that is so important. Um, uh, because you'll see this in the article too. I want you to show you this. I found a friend of mine who does a lot of work with wood, and you get to see this too. And the and I actually had lunch with him yesterday. Yesterday. And I said, can you find something like this in your forests and make one of these for me? Because he makes these into bowls. So you can see it sits there, and that's a bowl, and you can do things. But it looks like a brain. Even looks like one of those thimbles. It looks like it could be a Broca's area. Of course, this is nothing but a beautiful piece of wood. But he did find it. He made it for me, and he created it for me. And you can see, hopefully you can see that, where he engraved it with Endocast, which I always love. And I brought it to the lunch we had just so I could show it to him and show him that the article was coming out in a couple days, coming out very, very soon. And I am sure he was thrilled that we used his Endocast as part of one of the props for my presentation here today. So we are coming to the end. You will see next week. This is not completely filled, but I'm showing you this is how it's going to look. And there will be an article on my birthday, which is January 25th, 2024. You'll get to see that coming up soon. All of those scientists and their articles are hyperlinked to this one piece of paper. Again, not many people have the capacity to have all 24. Of course, I have 24 scientists there, 24 times 24 times 24. I mean, a tremendous amount of stars in our world about the brain, many that are not difficult to find, but there are just so many. If you're lucky, you know about Darwin and James and Broca, Dewey. But behind all of them, like they say, resting on the shoulders of so many others. So I'm trying to give you more information about how the brain works, how plasticity works, and why it's so important to tell other people, to educate other people about how the brain works so they can use it in all of their lives, whatever they do. Because it's not unlike photosynthesis. On any given day, we've learned about photosynthesis and we use it every day without even being consciously saying, oh, that has something to do with what I already know about how the sun works and how I grow things or ought to do one thing or another with or without the sun at any given day. The same thing with plasticity. People should also understand that, become it part of who you are. And then you don't have to think about it. Oh, is this, or is this? No, it's plasticity. This is how the brain works. Now you know a little. And then when you're now thinking, oh, I should be doing this, or I can feel what learning feels like as you learn something new. So anyway, this is what this whole series of a year has done, is help you better understand a little bit more about the science and the scientists, about the brain and plasticity. Have a good day. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. And I will see you next year with the next set of articles all about the brain, all about plasticity. Nice to see you all. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.